Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing kind of like a different video. Normally I'll talk about business, how to start a small business, just kind of my tips and tricks and advice and things like that is what you're used to if you've seen my videos. But today I want to talk about if you are looking to move from the GTA specifically to New Brunswick, which I have done with my husband. We've been here for about 2 years now. We're both originally from Toronto, born and raised, and we decided to move to New Brunswick. So, first things first, um, I think one of the main things that people are skeptical about and hear bad things of when it comes to New Brunswick. Now we're in a city specifically, so you know, like we're not like in the middle of nowhere. Is the weather, right? They're like, oh my gosh, like they get really really bad weather. I couldn't live there, yada yada yada. So I will say firsthand, the first year we were here, I think everybody had you know, a chill winter. Like I was hearing from back home in Ontario that the weather there was not as bad as it was the year before and prior years to that. So, and it was the same here. We had two maybe major snowfall, well, major snowfalls, which was maybe like not even 2 feet each of snow. So that was last year. This year is a little bit different because as soon as Christmas came, like Christmas Eve, we were snowed in. We did get about 3 to 4 feet of snow. And then in January, we had like 6 to 7 major snowfalls. It was happening like twice a week, where it was just like snowing for 24 hours straight. Um, Again, it only, or not only, but it did end up being another like 3 to 4 feet each snowfall. So yeah, there was a lot of shoveling. There was a lot of that. Um, Luckily, I have a really nice neighbor who helps us out because he has a snowblower. But to be honest, even with that, it isn't nothing I haven't seen in Ontario before. Especially like Toronto's one thing, but if you're from Barrie or like Owen Sound or like any type of like outskirt or like up north somewhere in Ontario, you've probably seen more snow than I have yet here. So I think one thing to remember when people are talking about really, really bad weather, usually that means you live in like the middle of nowhere. So the more like rural you get, so if you live in like a farmland or you're looking to buy property in the middle of nowhere, or in the country or like a farm, you're probably going to get hit worse than a city would or like a main city. So that's number one. Although I will say, Fredericton, because of the location of Fredericton and Moncton, they tend to get worse than us as well. Um, and like, I think that sometimes it is like you just have to do your research of like, are they on top of a mountain or like around a body of water? Like what's the deal, right? And when I say worse, I just mean like maybe they got like an extra like foot or two, or temperature seems to be a little bit colder there, by like 5 6 degrees type of deal. So they're not too far off. So I think when people are concerned about weather, just really remember where you're looking to live, right? Like, of course, if you're gonna live, if you go to Barrie in Ontario, they get hit really, really hard. So that's just, that if you think about it, it's not that different. Now, where it is completely different and it is, absolutely whether you've probably never experienced before, type of deal would be Newfoundland. Newfoundland and like PEI, Nova Scotia, they just get hit 10 times harder than New Brunswick does. And that is one of the reasons that me and my husband chose New Brunswick, because yes, like there's certain parts, like I said, that can get hit with like flooding or hurricanes. We do have hurricane season here. Now, the hurricane season that I've experienced, like both of them, it was just kind of like strong winds. But again, nothing that I have. Okay, I shouldn't say nothing that I haven't experienced before. It was definitely stronger than what I'm used to, but not by like much. You know, I'm not used to like when I open my door, it's like flinging open, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to think about when I open my door now. Um, During hurricane season, if it's like that windy, because I might lose a door if I'm in the process of opening it. But I'm not worried about like my roof, disappearing into the abyss or anything like that. Um, the rainstorms are huge. We do get different flooding in different areas. Um, Again, that's anywhere. That's just anywhere. If you're on the bottom of a hill, if your driveway slopes down towards your house, guess who's at a higher risk of flooding, right? So that's number one. I think that's kind of everyone's main concern. And again, not everybody can do it. My husband and I, like this winter, we got hit hard, and we're like, oh damn, like like wow, this has been a rough winter. But it's not like steering us away from like, oh my gosh, we need to move back. This is too much. Some people are like that, and it is what it is. It's just preference, and what you can deal with and what you can't, right? So that's just our experience with weather. Um, the other major concern, which is valid, that people have is healthcare. So if you ask me, healthcare is on fire in Canada in general. Doesn't matter where you go. If you're a Canadian, healthcare is on fire. Point blank, period. Now, in New Brunswick, one of the main differences that I've seen and where things aren't as convenient compared to Ontario is yes, we have walk-in clinics, but they're not technically like a walk-in clinic. What it is it's a clinic that you walk up to the door, you see a number, and they'll say, hey, like, do not walk in here, call the number, and we'll put you like on a priority list type of deal. So basically, you would have to text them the morning of. Best thing to do is first thing in the morning, like 8 a.m. or before 8 a.m. is ideal as well. And say, hey, look, I'm looking to be seen for X, Y, and Z. They do ask you to disclose the reason for your visit, whereas in Ontario, you could just walk in. They might ask you, but if you say, hey, I don't want to disclose, that's fine. I think here the system's a little bit different in the sense of like they're trying to see, they only have so many slots for the day, and they want to see who's a higher priority, right? So it is a little bit of a different system in that sense. It's not as convenient because you're just kind of waiting around for someone to call you back. My experience, I've had to use that system twice. They usually do text you back within like, I think the longest I waited was like 2 hours. The first time was about half an hour when I heard back from them. The first time they did not have time to see me. They did text me and say, hey, like, I'm sorry, we're fully booked for the day. The second time I was able to go, but they did call me and kind of almost give me like a mini interview of like, what's your issue? Have you tried this X, Y, and Z? There was a little bit of a pushback for the reason that I went. Oh, try this, try that. Like, you know what I mean? And you just kind of have to advocate for yourself and be like, no, I need to be seen. And this is why, this is what I've tried, blah, blah, blah. So that is a little bit different. And I get like, that might scare some people because they're like, oh my gosh, like if I want to see a doctor, I should be able to go see a doctor. And what I would say to that is you absolutely, no matter what, will be able to see a doctor. It might take you a long time to find like a family doctor, which is the other issue. But again, I know people that have moved to Ontario 6 years ago still don't have a family doctor because it's just so congested, right? My husband and I moved here about 2 years ago and we still don't have a family doctor. But at the end of the day, we do have a hospital that's open 24 hours a day. There is another hospital where the emergency room is only open until 9 p.m. I've had a really good experience there with the emergency room situation. I've gone twice, and both times were so much more pleasant than waiting in an emergency room in Toronto. Like, if you've been in an emergency room in Toronto, you know, it's absolutely hell. Like, there's someone screaming, there's someone like high on drugs that's just walking around super unpredictable. Like, you're getting a headache. And it's just super chaotic, right? Like, you're kind of concerned for your safety just sitting in the emerge. Um, and, you know, which kind of defeats the purpose of going to a hospital, if you ask me. Versus, you know, here in New Brunswick, when I went to the emergency room, it was so quiet, so peaceful. They are like, the workers do not play. They do not play around. Like, they're like, are you like, why are you screaming? Like, can you keep it down? You need to keep it down or you're going to be kicked out. Like, they are on the ball here, right? Like, they're just like, you know, the people here are super friendly and super nice. So when someone's acting obnoxious, they're like, no, we don't play. Like, you need to calm down or you're out, right? Which is kind of nice to see. But again, because like it is a smaller place, you can do that, right? With Toronto, there's just so many people that it's hard to maintain that type of deal there. So what I will say is, I went to the emerge. It was pretty minor, like a pretty minor issue, like nothing like super crazy, and not like high priority. And I was seen within like 3 hours. The second time I was seen, I think I waited a little bit longer, which is about 4.5 hours. Um, Versus like, there was a time in Toronto where it was pretty pretty a pretty big emergency. Like, I was tachycardic and my heart was doing really wonky things and like didn't have a like a correct like rhythm and like all that, you know what I mean? Like, it was just off. I literally thought I was having a heart attack. I wasn't, but my heart was not beating correctly, essentially, and it was super scary. And I went to the emerge at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I wasn't seen until 7 a.m. the next day. So yeah, that I'll just leave that at that, to your discretion. Um, my point being is, it really is not that bad. Yes, there's pros and cons. Um, but again, if you're in Canada, it's shit everywhere, to be blunt. Um, and you can always go to the hospital. You're always going to be seen. So far, I've been seen quicker. It's been quieter, much more pleasant. The doctors are nicer. The nurses are nicer. Everything like that. So again, if you have, obviously, like, if you have like a major health issue where you need to be following up with your family doctor every week, that might, you know, be a factor of maybe you don't want to come to New Brunswick, because the minute you move provinces, you're not going to have your family doctor. You have to go on a wait list, right? Um, so, of course, if someone has a family member that has a really serious heart condition or disease or anything like that, that they need to be seen weekly, or they need a specific specialist that we just don't have here, that makes sense as to why you're like, you know what, I can't make the move because my health is more important. So Toronto or like the GTA would make more sense for you to stay there in that case, if you're asking me. Um, so that is also another factor when it comes to healthcare. So yeah, I mean, healthcare wise, it's not super scary. It's not the worst case. Again, it really just depends, individual by individual. What else? One huge benefit to moving from the GTA to New Brunswick, of course, is the cost of living. So the housing is so cheap. It is really, really cheap. If you're used to the like the housing market in Ontario, where you get a very small, torn down bungalow for like $1 million, you can come here, find a house triple the size, modern inside, has had updates for like, you know, 3 to 400,000. There are still homes that are about in the 200,000 range too. Um, yes, it is slowly going up, but like you can't compare. It's like oranges and apples, right? Like you literally can't compare the two. And that's a big reason why people move, right? It can help them get away or get ahead financially. Like for me and my husband, in Toronto, we were living in a very small condo. My desk was literally touching his desk. Like we had such limited space. We do have two dogs. And so we both really wanted a home. And the sad part is we both had really good jobs. Um, but like, how are we still not able to afford a home? Like we had two really good jobs. No one was in debt. We had lots of savings and we weren't being pre-approved. And it was just because the prices of the homes were so incredibly insane. Not to say that yes, you can go to certain places in Ontario now and still find something in like the 600 to 700,000 range. Again, if you're like in the middle of nowhere, um, that still does exist. But I do find, generally speaking, in New Brunswick, you will find you're getting a lot more for your money. Like you'll get a bigger home, a lot more space, especially if you have kids, right? Like we don't even have kids, and I appreciate the space so much because it's like I have my own office. We have the bedroom. We have another bedroom for guests when they come and visit. Like it's just so nice, right? Like we don't have to stress about like visitors staying on a couch or you know what I mean? Like so that is that is definitely a pro or a perk to living in New Brunswick. And I also know a few people who have done the move. Like they had a property in the GTA that was worth a lot of money. They sold it and then they bought a house for super cheap here, and now they're mortgage free. Like if you think of how much money that frees up if you're living mortgage free, that's insane, right? So it can really change your life for the better or the worse, really. I mean, it again, everyone's situation is different. Some people can't do it because of the isolation, which I'll get into next. Um, but yeah, it can be a game changer, and a lot of the appeal is the mortgage. It's the mortgage rates. It's the state of the housing crisis in Canada right now, or specifically Ontario. And yeah, people are like, look, I'm out. I can't do this. People are trying to survive, and it's insane. So that is definitely, again, it's a pro. Um, Now, touching on isolation, that is definitely something you need to really sit down and think about because one of the reasons that, or one of the top reasons that people leave New Brunswick that moved from Ontario originally is isolation. There's not many people around, like it's so much smaller. It doesn't matter what town or city you end up in. You can end up in Moncton, Fredericton, St. John. Like it's always going to be smaller comparatively to Toronto. And I'm talking about Toronto specifically. If you're like from Barrie or, then it might not feel that different. Then you're like, whatever. Um, Now, the isolation is you really do, of course, have to sit down and think, like, for me, I really sat down and was like, my friends, I've had my same group of friends since I was a teenager. We are like family. I have, close family members as well that I see. I didn't see them like very often. Like, I would see them, like, family wise, I would see them like every few months. Whereas with my friends, like I was going out twice a month, three times a month, depending. And it could just like by going out, sometimes it's just like, hey, I'm going to Home Sense. You want to come with me? Or like going to get your hair done with your girlfriend, or like just going for a coffee. Those little things really do keep you sane, even if it's for half an hour to an hour. And I think that's so important, is to have a community of people that you can just step away from your home life and really rant to them and spend that quality time. That's just me. That's not everybody. So for me, it was a huge adjustment. Like for my husband, He didn't really see his friends in person a lot because like a lot of them just like, will play games online or they just chat on Discord and whatever, right? So not much has changed for him there socially. But for me, I'm more old school. I like to go have a physical coffee, meet up in person. So it was a struggle for me. I'm not gonna lie. Like the first year, I was like, man, I don't know if I could do this. Like it was rough. I knew I would miss my friends. So and I did know because I was that in person um, type of person. I was like, I looked into the flights of like how much it would cost me to fly back home, um, to spend some quality time with my friends and family once in a while, right? Like I knew I wanted to fly back maybe even twice a year, right? Like everyone has their needs, has their whatever, right? So for me, I've been able to fly back at least twice a year since we've moved. It's a 2 hour flight. I do use Flair. Flair is really cheap. The only downside to Flair is they don't fly in the winter. And sometimes even in the spring they don't fly. They're more in the summer, which was fine with me because I don't want to be flying in the winter. I don't want to really be flying in the spring either, right? Like it is kind of nice to go in the summer and actually like do something fun with your friends when the weather's nice or with your family, right? So that's not a big deal. You can find flights for like $200 if you just have a carry on. I don't really check a bag. Um, I usually just take a carry on and we'll just do laundry there and like staying with a family member or friend. Um, so yeah, you can find some pretty cheap flights. But I did do my homework. I did sit down and was like, I know I want to go back. At least I can't just. I didn't want to be the person that just moved away and you're never gonna see Mel again. Like I was like that is not gonna happen. I don't like no. So because you don't want to be that person, if you're like me, just look into it. Are you going to drive? Some people drive. I have a friend, like, she comes to the East Coast. She has family members in the East Coast, and she's in Toronto. She drives by herself. It's like a 15, 14-hour drive at times, and um, she has no problems doing that. I personally would rather fly because I feel like if you drive, then, like, you need like an extra day just to rest, so you kind of lose a day when you get there. But again, that's neither here or there. That's really just up to personal preference. So yeah, even though like I'm away from my family and friends, of course I miss them. It was really hard for me in the beginning. But what's really important is that anytime a friendship or relationship is now long distance, it really is up to the people to maintain it and put in the effort, right? Like I have a friend of mine, she makes sure, like, she's like, hey, we haven't talked in a while. Let's like let me call you on Thursday. You know what I mean? Um, I switched to now I try to have more video calls versus just like a phone call. And that's just me. It just makes it more personal. I can see your face, like, you know what I mean? Um, and we'll chat for hours on the phone. So instead of going to the home sense or whatever, we're just having that time where, doing the dishes or doing the laundry and we're just on the phone with each other chatting about our day and whatever, right? Um, so to me, as long as you're still getting that like quality time in some form, it doesn't always have to be in person. Although I do miss that a lot, and I will say. Um, but again, you'll figure it out if the friendship or the relationship with the family member is close enough. You'll make it work. And one thing I had to deal with was more just like guilt. Like I felt like guilty for moving and just kind of like leaving people. Like I felt like I was leaving them behind, even though I just said I just visit all the time and I'm on the phone with them all the time. Um, at the end of the day, we all have our own lives. You really have to stop and think, what do I want for my life? And what was best for me and my husband was to have a home, to save money on a mortgage. You know what I mean? It has changed our lives for the better. It hasn't been perfect. But, just a little personal story here. When we first moved, we were both working remotely. Um, and last year, I was let go from my job because they decided to do like a mass layoff, unfortunately. So, um, if that had happened in Toronto, I would have to go and find a job right away, like that. Like, I would have to be like, shit, I need to go, like, to survive, just to keep up with mortgage and everything like that, right? Here, I was able to take a step back because the housing was so cheap. I was able to just take a step back and focus on Melted by Mel, which, if you follow me, is my little small candle business that I started. Um, and I'm not going to be able just to do that forever. I am going to eventually go back to work probably this year, um, full time, and still have it as my side thing. But the fact that I was able just to take a year off, sit back and be like, let me focus on this, let me give it some leverage, um, was amazing, right? Like, there's just little things like that that you wouldn't be able to do, um, if your finances are too expensive, right? Like, which most people's are with freaking inflation and groceries and everything else, which I'll get into. Um, so yeah, you really just have to see what's the best for you. But for me, it has changed my life, in a positive way. Of course, the con is being away from your friends and family. Some friendships do change, just because you don't see each other as often. But if you ask me, if it's a really true friendship, you'll find ways and you'll make it work. Um, so yeah, that is the isolation part. Moving on to groceries and gas, that is the one thing that is more expensive in New Brunswick. Groceries are about maybe like a dollar or two, depending, on the item. Most things are pretty on par with Ontario. I mean, again, it's shit everywhere. But like milk, I've seen milk for like $9, which is insane. That doesn't really affect me because I don't really drink milk. I usually stick to like almond milk and stuff, which is again like usually the same price at Costco. Um, and again, if you're shopping at Costco, you're already saving money. That's just me. Um, Gas is about 10 cents more than Ontario. Although there are times that, I'll talk to my dad and he'll say, oh, gas is 156 here. And I'll look and I'll be like, oh, it's actually 156 here too right now. So there are times that it is actually the same. But in general, I do find we are about 10 cents more expensive, in New Brunswick than Ontario for gas. So that is one thing to keep in mind in terms of like expenses. But yeah, that's really it. Overall, like I said, it's changed my life for the better. If you have kids and things like that, just look into the area. Some like people that I've met out here that have moved, one of their complaints is that they don't have like a after school program or this or that, or like there's a wait list because um, there's not as many around, that type of deal. And again, that really just depends on location. You just have to do your research. Um, but yeah, like I guess another factor, like work wise, like I said, for me and my husband, we were both working from home. So we were able to pick up our laptops and go. And I encourage anybody, doesn't even mean like you need to leave the province, but if you have a remote job and you're pretty confident in that job, like don't tie yourself down to a place that's just like super expensive to live if you don't need to, right? Some people have to because of family and things like that. Um, but if you can, yeah, like do it because it's definitely worth it, especially in this day and age to save money. So yeah, as a recap, healthcare isn't as bad as they say. The weather isn't as bad as they say where I am anyway. That's more like Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. Um, consider the isolation. Consider, um, you know, your health issues, how major they are. Think about how often you see your doctor, those types of things. Think about jobs. Now, if you do, just touching on jobs as well, like if you do have to find like a physical job here, again, it depends on where you are. Of course, if you live in the middle of nowhere, it's probably going to take you a little bit longer because you're in a smaller town, or you might have to commute to the bigger city. But you know, people do that in the GTA. Like, how many people have we met that live in Barrie but travel down to Toronto for work, right? That's just kind of the same deal anywhere. So, yeah, that has been my experience. These are some things that I advise to consider and to really sit down and look at if you're thinking of moving from Ontario to New Brunswick. Um, if you have questions about different areas and want to know them more specifically, if I'm familiar with the area, I'll let you know. I can answer any questions, make another video. I do make some videos also driving around different neighborhoods just to kind of give people an idea. They are beautiful, so keep an eye out for that. If there's a specific neighborhood that you would like me to review or drive through, let me know, and I'm happy to do so. Thank you so much for watching.